Welcome to Happy Clubhouse, with a review of the Bandai high-grade Gundam Breaker Battlogue 1144 Gundam Helios, which fans in America have already gotten a month ago along with some other kits, but the rest of the world is only starting to get now. The Helios is one of the three main characters at the center of the new Gundam Breaker Battlogue short animation, and for this worldwide release, we're only getting the Helios along with the Live Lanced Heaven in this first wave of release. Getting right down to business, the Gundam Helios was released on October 4, 2021 in America, and November 6, 2021 for the rest of the world, which is a first for Bandai to debut model kits in the United States. The kit cost 2,530 yen, and the box art is by Koma, who we haven't seen for a while on boxes for a long time, but for these Gundam Breaker Battlogue kits you will notice more than a few uncommon artist names credited to the artwork. The box is really thick, measuring 31 by 19 by 9 centimeters, and we'll see why in a bit. The side of the box tells us that this is the first release for the Gundam Breaker Battlogue line, and everything else is reprinted from the front of the box. The other side is exactly the same. The long side of the box has fewer photos than you might expect to show off the kit, and the other side reminds you that you can mix and match all the body parts and limbs on these kits, and then there's a quick plug for the animation, and then it's all legal text. Inside the box, we get the Helios spread across 11 runners with the first 6 right here, and then the other 5 right here. Among the parts, we have these runners taken from the HCCE Freedom Gundam. And then for the frame parts here, these 2 are taken from the HGCE Destiny Gundam, which may surprise you that everything else on this kit are actually new parts. We get a sheet of foil stickers with one here for the eyes, then this one here for the forehead camera, then we get yellow triangles for the knees, and also one for the back skirt here, and these gray ones go onto the side of the ankle armor. The green ones here are for these parts on the wings, and then these slightly different ones go onto here on the side of the wings as well. These long green ones are for this line that runs along the beam cannons on the wings, and these small ones go onto the aiming sensor on each of the satellite cannons. For instructions, we get some info on the Helios and we'll say who made it, but if you've played the phone game, you've already seen him from there. On the back, we have the different parts and the weapons of the Helios. And then in this corner, it tells you about the different elements that's mixed into the kits, but we will take a look at each of them in a bit more detail a little bit later. There are 3 more inner color pages, and all of them are for assembly instructions. The black and white side is all for assembly instructions, as you'd expect. A bit under 3 hours later, we have the Helios all put together here, and just to get this out of the way, the wings go so high up that it makes this kit really top heavy and it can barely stand even with the really big forward lunge that you see right here. You're not going to see him topple over during this review because I've cut all those out, but it's just a reality of physics that he really can't keep himself up against all that weight. Now, we don't see this particular sky blue used much as a main color for MSs, and if you're not a big fan of it, it can be a bit bland because it is used throughout the entire Helios, including the wings, with some small bits of highlights provided by the yellow on the chest fence and then the red on the lower waist. The clear green parts are of course beautiful, and ones like these on the collar look beautiful as light hits that curved surface, but the aqua green color does tend to blend in with the sky blue a little bit, and they're slightly too close in their hue to really show off all the variety that is actually here. I imagine if people picked another Battlogue kit over the Helios, it may very well be that the colors here just don't stand out as much as they can. But like I said, if you happen to like this tone, then that's never going to be an issue. And of course, we have to look at all the parts that this kit borrows from other kits, and it's mostly only the looks because actually everything that we're going to compare here, it's mostly going to be new parts, which is pretty bizarre. First up is the head that's supposed to be from the Destiny Gundam. On the entire Helios, this is actually the only part that's taken from the Destiny, and this of course is an entirely new mold. I don't have the HGCE Destiny, so I can't do a side-by-side, but the nicest upgrade here is the clear green parts for the eyes and the head camera that the HGCE kit didn't have. Schizophrenic has detailed photos of the 2 side-by-side, and there is a link in the description, so you can go have a better look at them side-by-side over there, and I'm not gonna go rip his work in entirety over here in the video. The overall head is not distinctly better or worse. I mean, it is a little bigger, but otherwise it's an interesting alternate sculpt of that same part. Next up, we have the torso, which comes from the Gundam X, and this too is an entirely new sculpt. Once we bring in the HGAC Gundam X, we can see the drastic difference in size. The Helios is actually a really big kit, and all of its parts are scaled up from their supposed sources. Only the torso itself here is from the Gundam X, so ignore the legs for now, they're just here to show you the radical change in size. If we take the legs off, then the difference in size isn't nearly as drastic, though you can still clearly see that the Helios is a little bit bigger. The geometry of the two are actually nothing alike, with the newer torso making a lot of the details more clear. The small vents on the front may not be to everyone's taste, but that was likely done to make the Helios look even bigger. The most significant upgrades are the clear parts on the collar, which are uncolored on the HGCE kit, which isn't something you can easily do even in a custom build. The shapes are very different, like that top part there that's much longer, so you can't swap them over without some major reconstruction. The next key difference is the clear part on the chest, with the Helios one having patterns molded onto it, which the HGCE one does not. The HGCE one really looks quite lacking if you put it side by side with the new torso like this, even though it never looked bad before. A closer look at the chest piece from the inside shows that the details are molded directly on the inner surface of the part, so it isn't a separate inner part that gives you all these details, and this can look a little bit odd when you know this, because the space behind the clear part is actually entirely empty. So you will notice this from time to time and it is a bit unsightly, so if you're a builder, then it's best to fill this space up with the part. Then of course you're already thinking, can we donate this new torso to the HGCE to get an upgrade? Well, it's actually no on all fronts. The first obstacle you're going to face is the backpack part, which doesn't have the now universal double peg, so you're going to have to glue it on. That's just a bit of brute force really, but even then, the X's legs have ball joints and the new torso has pegs, but let's say you solve even that with some surgery. Well, this here gives you an idea of the beast that you're gonna get in the end. Yeah, the head and the arms fit without any alterations, but the torso is clearly way too big, and it throws the entire shape of the MS way off balance. The Helios looks a little less strange, but if you look at the waist, it just suddenly dips in right there, and it's clear that this part wasn't actually meant to be here. Next we have the legs, which are supposed to be from the Double X, and these new ones are way longer than the HGAC ones with all the geometry rearranged, like the calves here, which are tucked way up. The vents on the knees are now also done in grey, which is nice, although the old ones actually aren't that bad because that part is separated and you can paint it pretty easily. From the side, the unit housing the fins is actually really wide and it's slightly clumsy looking on the new ones, so actually the old ones win out from this angle. The ones on the Helios look a bit too chubby and they lack that menacing angle shape of the original. Opening them up, the Helios has clear green parts here, but they're also smaller, while the old ones are in solid yellow, but they are larger. The side of the legs lack that inner detail on the Helios, which is a big shame. From the back, you can see that change in geometry much better, where the side of the Double X's feet are supposed to be flat, but the new ones here just have the fins resting on top of the calves right there. Otherwise, you can identify the same general details all represented in the new legs. The strange twist here is that the two pairs of legs can't be swapped, even though you'd think they could. The new legs can't go into the slightly larger peg of the Double X's hip, but the joint part of the leg is actually a solid polystyrene piece, so you actually can widen the hole if you're really that determined. On the other side, if we put the Double X's feet onto the Helios, they just flop like this, confirming that the sizes are indeed a little bit different. You're free to speculate if this is intentional or not, because the Helios is the only kit that has this strange leg joint. It's possible that Bandai specifically didn't want these new parts to be compatible with the older kits out of the box. Either way, it is a great big shame that we can't mix and match, even though the Battlogue boxes encourage that with these kits. Then we have the backpack, which has two parts that we need to look at. So first, let's look at the satellite cannon, which is from the Gundam X. The line and the geometry on the new cannon is a bit more bold and it's a bit more confident, with the old one looking a little narrow and flat in comparison. Surprisingly, the two aren't that different in length, even though they are shaped quite differently. It's a similar story really with what we've seen previously, with the new geometry being cleaner and sharper, like the sword handle being bigger, but the barrel fully extended like this. The old cannon actually has some inner details that are exposed there, where the new one doesn't have that. And of course, the old one has a handle too, which the new one only has a molded detail to suggest that being there. Unlike all the other parts, you're actually free to use this new gun with the old kit like this, and it works mostly without any fuss on the same peg. Although if we go over to the Helios, you can see that the old cannon actually sits a bit lower than the new one, so the position where it connects isn't exactly the same, even though it fits. Maybe you're the odd builder from the future who's looking for exactly this information, come say hi in the comments and tell me about it if you are, because I don't think anyone else bothered to try this. Since we're here, let's check out the swords side by side when they're removed from the satellite cannon. Now the difference here is quite clear, where the Helios one is much bigger, both with the handle and with the beam blade, though maybe you might not be a fan of slightly odd seawater green for the new beam blade, and the older one is the more traditional neon green. Also, the older blade actually has beam effects that are turned 90 degrees on the side as well, which might be something you'll miss on the new ones. And this is kind of obvious, but no, the blades don't fit into one another. I forgot to get a footage of it, but the HGAC-X can't hold this new handle because the handle is too thick. The other part of the back unit are these wings, which are the first part that we've seen so far that isn't a new mold. These are taken entirely from the HGCE Freedom Gundam, but they're just turned upside down, so absolutely nothing has changed mechanically. It's just reduced to 2 colors here and then it's plugged right back in. Which is to say, the cannon in the middle is here just as always, and it can still swing outwards, which surprisingly still works when the wing is upside down, as we'll see later. Now for sanity's sakes, let's have the wings pointing down here. They can pivot forwards and backwards like this, and they can swivel along that really meaty peg that should be quite durable. This seems like not a lot of movements, but this is actually a really good design because the wings themselves have a lot of moving parts, and this keeps this complex wing from being too fussy and fiddly. Before we look at how the wings open, let's first look at the new arms and the clear parts on it. The shoulders here have a bit of Gundam Unicorn DNA, but these are entirely original designs. The center detail here is actually clear green, and this highlights a problem with the green being so similar in tone with the blue. It's very possible that you didn't notice this part was clear at all, which is quite a waste, so a complementary color like orange or red would have made this stand out way more. There's another clear part on the back of the hand here, which is a nice detail to have, but this has another annoying problem that we're going to see a little bit later. The panels here open up a la the Double X, and the 2 fins inside are also in clear green, which are very nice to look at. The original arms are a nice touch, and it keeps the Helio from being completely a straight up chimera that's stitched together from a bunch of other MSs. To put the Helios into its full burst mode, which it doesn't call it that, but I'm not exactly sure what they call it, the cannons block each other as it is like this, so you want to raise it up to here, and then you want to rotate the gun, and fold it back down first, which the instructions don't tell you to do. Then raise the other gun and do that same rotation. Now trust me that if you do this, it's going to make your life way easier, or else the guns are just going to block each other like crazy. Then you need to move the guns down to point it towards the front, but you're going to need to cheat it a little bit to get them past the blade antenna, which is way too wide, but just pretend that they pass through without any issues. And then extend the barrels and the cannons are ready. For the wings, we want to fan out the middle and the back section like this, and that's going to let us turn the gun forward, and then we're going to need to swing it back around to tuck it inside the arms. Then just adjust the wings a bit to get this nice even spread here, and that takes care of the wings. Lastly, open up the radiator fins on the arms and the legs, which we've seen in action already, and that way we have the Helios ready in this full firing mode. I moved the satellite cannons a bit higher here for this shot so the shoulder isn't as cramped. There really is a lot of peacocking going on here with most of the silhouette from the opened up wings, but they do match the look of the radiator fins as well, and the Helios gains a radial pattern to its overall shape, which wasn't there when everything was closed up, so this is an interesting transformation to have. Speaking of silhouettes, when the Helios is all closed up, it's not super obvious, but he is supposed to remind you of the Double X with the upturned wings and the 2 cannons, though it does take a few mental leaps to actually get there, so this isn't one of the more successful points in the design. The hands we get are all from the Destiny, so we have 2 holding hands, and then 2 Palma Fiochina hands. The hand covers here are all new and they work really well with the fingers, and the fingers have always been really nicely sculpted in a very natural shape. They're otherwise pretty normal holding hands. The totally not shining finger hands are a sort of side effect of using the Destinies as joint parts, and we don't get the beam effect for the hands, so these palms are all you get. They're mostly useful for the firing mode as we saw earlier right here, and I suppose it's better that we have them than not have them, and you can get quite a bit of mileage out of them if you're creative, if you're posing. So overall, no real big problems here, and there's nothing really worth complaining about. For weapons, we get the Destiny Gundam's beam rifle, which comes from that same runner for the joints, and it's entirely the same one that you get from that kit. It's 2 parts sandwiched together with the barrel at the front its own piece, and the scope on the top can sway side to side, and the front handle can also sway side to side like this. The back of the scope is hollow, which they disguise with the horizontal wall, but this is easy enough to fill in for builders who don't like this. There is a slightly unsightly peg sticking out the side which plugs in their back skirt here, though this is nice because now the gun has somewhere sensible to go when the Helios is firing all its cannons. The hands were made for this gun, so of course they fit like a glove, as you'd expect. We get a beam effect part for the shield, which is also a reference taken from Destiny. It's a single clear piece with that same clear bit that's on the back of the hand, molded directly onto the shield, which is a little bit strange how they're all the same color like this. The sculpt does look great at least, but the problem here arises when we go back to the arms and realize there's actually no way to get these green parts off. They sit flush with the blue part on the back, and they're actually on pretty tight. So what you're forced to do is take something really sharp like my pointy needle here, and just very carefully wedge it in and use the thickness to push it up to get that part off. But you can see even here that I left a scratch mark on the blue side which will be visible through the green part, and this part here is basically an incomplete design that requires you to use tools to remove that part in an invasive way, which is not good. But this is what the shield looks like on the arm, which is certainly nice, and it makes it an even greater shame that you can't swap this in and out without damaging your kit. What the hell, Bandai? We've seen the sword a bit already, but here it is when we pull the handle out from the satellite cannon. And here is the blade plugging into the handle in case it keeps you up at night having never seen this. We sort of get an extra weapon with the Freedom Gundam's double beam sabers. Now these aren't really a part of the Helios and they just happen to be among the parts that's left over that we get, but you can use this if you want as long as you donate some beam blades to it. Speaking of extra parts, we get a whole lot right here from the Freedom Gundam. There are some frame bits from Destiny that's left over too, but those are far less coherent than the parts right here. So any of this is free for you to swap into the Freedom if you want to mix up the colors for any reason. I do have a Freedom, but it's not assembled, so sorry that I can't show you these parts installed onto the actual kit, though it's probably going to look pretty strange. Sadly, this is all surplus parts that you are forced to pay when you buy the Helios. Onto the articulation, I've removed the back unit to keep this whole kit easier to handle. So starting from the top, the head looks up a decent amount, and it goes downwards a surprising lot. It can turn around a full circle with nothing getting in the way. The shoulder joint swings forward like this even with a really blocky shoulder. It can be adjusted on its ball joint. The arms swing out this much, and they swing around a full circle. They can rotate along the bicep a full circle, and the double jointed elbow folds up until the arms hit the shoulder. The forearms rotate as well and they go around a full circle. The hands can be adjusted on their ball joint, and they can rotate a full circle. The waist dips forward this much, and it dips backwards a little bit. The upper torso can rotate a full circle, which you can still do with the back unit, though it's probably going to be much more clumsy. The front skirt flips way up like this. The side skirt lifts up about 45 degrees. The back skirt doesn't move. The legs can swing outwards this much, and they can rotate along the thigh like this. The forward kick goes 90 degrees even though the front skirts go way further up. And the back kick is basically nothing. The double jointed knee folds nicely, though not quite making 180 degrees. The ankle armor rocks on their peg like this. The ankle can move along an axis like this. The foot is on a ball joint which you can adjust. And the toes can fold downwards like this. The Helios moves exactly as a modern HD kit should, and it's very much a very typical kit from 2021. All the stuff on the back are pretty unwieldy, but they can get out of the way and even help with the pose, so they're actually never a problem. But you'll almost certainly want to pose this kit on an action base because the weight distribution on this thing is just all over the place and it can't really pose much if it's standing on its own. For size comparisons, here's the lower end benchmark, the entry grade RX-78. And then here's the upper end benchmark, the high grade new Gundam. We've kind of spoiled this already, and we already know that the Helios is a big boy even without its wings, and the head height of the Helios goes right past the RX-78, but it's not quite able to fit right in the middle between it and the new Gundam. The ridiculous upturned wings do make it go right past the new, of course, and that's actually going to take up a lot of space on your shelf and it's going to block a lot of guys that stand behind him. With all that said, here's the Hobby Clubhouse 3-point verdict on the Bandai high-grade Gundam Breaker Battlogue 1144 Gundam Helios. Number 1, it's a mostly new mold. Even though the Helios takes its part from many different Gundams like the X and X and Destiny, it really is quite shocking to see all those parts are entirely new sculpts when you'd think Bandai would never do that. So as a Gundam model fan, a big part of the fun here is seeing these new interpretations of bits and parts from these older kits, and wondering what it could be if X or X were released today, not that X is that old. New parts are beautifully sculpted and they are up to modern quality standards as we expect, and it's great to know that actual work and care went into this kit, which at worst this could have been a Frankenstein's monster of recycled parts, but it isn't. And number 2, it's clumsy to handle and enjoy. When you have this kit, you're gonna notice you're gonna enjoy it much more without the back unit, because it's easier to pose and it's easier to appreciate all that fine sculpt. With the wings and the cannon, the kit is pretty heavy and it just juts out all over the place. You're gonna knock the cannons and the wings as you grip the Helios, and you can't help but wonder if the wings are a bit more hassle than they're worth. Now, worse yet, if you turn the wings back down, they actually play way more nicely with the rest of the kit and they're way more tame, so you gotta wonder if Bandai didn't push this bit of design a little bit too far at the expense of the kit's integrity. Now, you're not gonna hate this kit, but you will like it much more without the fussy stuff on the back. And number 3, this is exciting for builders because I'm sure someone will set out to try and adopt the Gundam X and X parts in interesting ways for custom builds, or maybe do something as simple as transplanting the satellite cannon onto the old kit, or maybe the extra Freeedom parts are exactly what you need for a project or a repair, or maybe you want a Gundam unicorn with custom shoulders. The parts on the Helios may very well be your best reason to get one, and I think that's great because the kit is actually very friendly for mixed builds even though the size isn't quite as friendly. Anyway, maybe that is your reason to go and pick one of these up. And that's the review for the Gundam Helios. It's a slightly oddball kit that's actually brand new, but it disguises itself as a recycled kit bash. Thank you so much for watching. Come look us up on social media with updates on upcoming videos and sneak peeks at future projects, links in the description below, or hang out here some more with one of these other videos. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos from Hobby Clubhouse, and I'll see you next time.